Hi.
Hello.
Hello. It's part 3. We hope you enjoyed part 1 and part 2. You must have, because you're here for part 3. Part 3, we're going to pick up the interview and finish it. So, stick around. So then the 5th question that we have written here that we ask ourselves is, how did we course correct, right? And so I think that we just pretty much did a decent job. And when talking about the 5th question, answering this, but we can also polish that up a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so the way that I say that I would course correct on this is that I really got deep into the mindset of wanting to create to where the music made you feel just playful. And so when I went in it like that, whereas before I make everything would be so serious, with heavier music, with aggressive playing guitar and loud instruments and aggressive instruments, everything creates this vibe of being very direct and focused. And it's not that I'm creating a sloppy, unfocused sound when I course corrected. It was more so that I had to create just a sound that pulls you in a different way. It went from being a neon color to being the same color but a more natural shade of it. So it went from the sound of like a cello, right? So that's still very much like the bottom heavy bass guitar. It's closer to that. But how would I use that in a way that the energy is soft, but still with this instrument that is designed to fill up the bottom part of my orchestration? And so those are the kinds of things that had to change. How do the violas and the violins sitting in the range that the guitar does, more so the viola, but how would that do the same thing that a guitar does, but course corrected for these instruments? Like how would I? And that's how I had to go through and place all of those different things. I'd have these like swelling effects and these crashes and these booms and these sub drops and all of these interesting like cinematic like skipping sounds and all of this electronica stuff that I was doing for Guy Wolf. And then all of a sudden it's like I took that same stuff for the course correction. I took that same kind of mindset and I just turned it this direction instead of this direction. And that's how I realized, okay, wait a minute. I kind of beat myself up a little bit too much maybe when I was also feeling discouraged on the fact that, I'm not as strong at being as composer as I arrogantly thought. But then wait a minute, maybe I am. I just have to course correct this. And so now you had just talked about how, you were shading things differently and the lines were becoming different in your course correction. Was there any more details about that? Was there any other aspect of that aided or pushed or inspired a course correction?
One of the things that really inspired it was I felt like obviously it wasn't what I had created was not gentle enough. And so I went back and I was like, how am I going to create like a gentle setting? I want it to be less like you're looking at a picture of an actual photograph, and it's more like you're imagining a setting. And it's like, how did, Winnie the Pooh capture that? And that's why like things fade into the background. But then I also thought to myself, because that's part of drawing atmosphere, is knowing that as things get further away from you, they actually blend into the color of the atmosphere. So they're less, like if you're looking even at mountains, as they get further and further back, they fade into the blue color of the sky because, that atmosphere has a color. So I wanted it to be like less focused when I was drawing on everything that was going on in the setting. So like when I did the treehouse initially, it was like, okay, here's the yard, here's the fence, there's, this is in the back of the yard. And it's very clear. It's very clear that over here there's something and over here there's something. And I was trying to create this very like detailed habitat to put it in. But I didn't really want that. What I wanted was it to be more like you were imagining it. So the things that were clearest, that were the most important, were like the tree, and then like the grass around it, and then as you go away from that, it starts fading into what is the background and the atmosphere of the page, which is white. So the fence in the background no longer had each individual slat like meticulously drawn out. It was left really sketchy and kind of like a really muted color, so that it seemed like it was fading into the background. And I think that in and of itself is what gave the setting its true like children's book of it being in your head rather than being like an actual place, is because there was less to focus on. And so the only things that really matter in the setting are the things that matter in the setting.
The set piece.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so working my way back to that, that's what I ended up, that's where I was like, okay, I had too much going on. It was too busy. A lot of the times that's a really common problem to run into when you're creating something, is to get too detailed, to be too busy, to layer too much, you know, and so the less was more with this. And so that's what, when I peeled it back and I was like, okay, well, obviously I just need this. But I do want to give it a feel of the atmosphere, and I just want it to feel more like an imagination. So, you know, this is muted, there's not going to be as much detail. Where there is detail, it's not refined like, you know, in her, I keep bringing up the treehouse setting. You know, there's some landscaping in her parents' yard. Her dad worked real hard on it, but it's not, it's not, you know, meticulously drawn out to where you're just like that. You know, he's got hydrangeas there. You know, it's like, it's kind of like a green blob that you're like, you know, there's a bush or something. Yeah. But it doesn't matter. So, and it's muted. So it's like, it gives you that sense of space, but in the same way that if, like I told you right now, to like imagine your backyard, you would have important landmarks in your head, and then you know, your brain would just kind of fill in everything else. And that's kind of what I wanted to give a feel for the setting when I went and peeled everything back to it. And once I had that, I think everything else just kind of started falling into place.
That's pretty cool. I'm into that. Okay, moving along here. So now I'm going to ask us our sixth question.
Okay.
What did we learn from this process? So what I learned from this that got me pretty excited was that I needed to get back in touch with the keyboard. And this is just something that my mother had me do when I was homeschooled. You know, it hooked to the computer and it would teach you, and it was just something I had to do. And I didn't like it at first, but as time grew on, you know, I did kind of like it, but then ultimately I heard Metallica, and then that just pretty much changed my existence.
Yeah.
And kind of directed me away from it, and I kind of lost the skill, and in some ways I regret it. I didn't completely lose it.
Right.
But
you didn't polish it, so it's slightly perishable.
And it just sat there kind of stagnant. And so this project, when I hooked that up, you know, to get the virtual symphony going, and I could see my layers of instruments, you know, my bass instruments, you know, you get your cello and your lower horns over here, and you have your viola and violins, and then maybe some, you know, the higher woodwinds, and I could see the band, the orchestra set out before me, and I was the conductor. And it was like something about the keyboard, the visual representation of it, and then actually where the instruments really do have their ranges. And just seeing all that laid out was really nice, and it gave me this sense of like, okay, this is me acting as an artist in the capacity of working for a production company, you know, a pseudo production company, but with your help, a real production company. So seeing the keyboard in all of its glory really helped bring me into that mentality, that mindset, that direction of, you know, I felt more like an artist. Nothing against just the guitar, you know, but it has its own place in the world of my, and it will always be my preferred instrument to write with.
Right.
But something about the keyboard, all of those visual things I talked about, and how all of those musical components fit onto that when I was writing, really, you know, helped me learn that I need to get back in touch with this, and then it's opening up another avenue of me being an artist. Another thing I learned was to take what I already knew, and instead of reinventing the wheel, was I just had to put it into this certain light and kind of just do a new spin on an old formula. And then that really helped me see that, okay, instead of being discouraged entirely by this and feeling inadequate, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I can take some of what I do know, and if I just change it, it works.
Mm-hmm.
So there was so many different things. Honestly, I could go on for a really long time talking about what I learned from this, but I'm interested in what you learned from this as you developed this as an artist. What was going on in your world?
For me, I think that the biggest thing that I kind of pulled away from this was not necessarily, the biggest thing was not necessarily something that was brand new to me. It was just something that I realized I need to focus on. So the idea of trying to work general to specific is really important when you're creating something. But what I realized I had done is I had theorized my work general to specific, and then when I jumped in, I tried to jump in at the end, rather than starting the process from the beginning and working through any hiccups that I might not have foreseen when I was creating the idea in my head. So making sure that I start at block one and start going general to specific rather than trying to jump in at the end because I'm so excited. That was something that is just kind of like a big slap in the face. Like, hey man, you know to do this, do it. But a big thing that I have never really focused on with a lot of projects is tone. I think I need to be more sensitive to tone and getting comfortable in using like comic book feel, like bold line work and stuff like that didn't service the tone of what I was trying to create. And I think that was my biggest flaw when I started this, was I wasn't being sensitive to that, and that everything should have a specific tone to it, you know what I mean? And so I think that was probably, I would say, the biggest thing I learned, just flat out, like, wow, that wasn't even on my radar, but now it is.
It's pretty cool. I have to say I'm really proud of us for growing and expanding on this. I know from myself and my past experiences, when you were talking about throwing away drawings, I've got plenty of unfinished songs, plenty of one-off riffs just chilling in a project I haven't opened in 15 years. I'm sure there's some gold sitting there, but I just never went back to visit it. So I understand that, and if this was my own project, I would have went back to the drawing board and just picked up on something else, and it would probably have been something that I was comfortable with.
Right.
And so what I'm proud about is that we although we botched deadlines on our own part,
Yeah.
both of us contributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
We recovered from it and we made something out of it. We learned from it and we're growing from it. And that is huge.
Yeah.
That is mega important. And even if this thing didn't turn into what we thought it was going to be, but that's not what I think at all.
Right.
I'm actually super stoked about it. But even if it didn't, we learned something from this, And that's how I view failure. I know some people just outright say, oh, you failed. Like, I failed. We failed. They failed. This is, Well, I'm more so like, okay, it didn't work.
Yeah.
So technically, yes, that is a failure. But in my opinion, it's an ultimate failure if you don't learn. If you don't learn, I like to view failure, especially in this sense, not so much like if we fail, like if I failed at something and someone died. Okay, I wouldn't be like, okay, this is a learning experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different, okay? There is some true failure.
But when sensitivity training for that one.
Yeah, right. But like for an artist, the failure thing, or just even as an entrepreneur, or you just trying to make it in the corporate world, or you're trying to make it in your academic world, or you got a circle of friends thing, fitness, or whatever it is, on those things where failure is a little softer, it's a little more muted, it's a little, gentle, it's a little more blunt. Not in a bad way, but not in the stabbing you to death way.
Right.
Because blunt can still hurt.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna like maim you as bad, maybe, right?
Right.
So more so like that. Did you learn from this? Yes. So I like to say it's a learning experience instead of an outright failure. For my soul to be better, for me to still feel inspired to want to continue. If I can learn from the mistake, from the failure, then how I put it to sleep at night so that I could go to sleep at night is that this was a learning experience. And so we learned from it, we moved on, we got it done, we are putting a nice finishing touch to everything, and I'm stoked on this. You're gonna see more of Kara. She's gonna get a little more involved in this process from here, and I'm pretty excited. And so from that, to perfectly springboard off that, the only other thing you need to know is now you will see our journey home, which means you're gonna witness the project bloom into its intended glory. Enjoy.